Welcome to the Table podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we give you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to The Table, the podcast where student life professionals, educators, and change makers come together to share stories, insights, and ideas for building communities where everyone belongs. I'm your host, Bridget Johnson. Today, I have a conversation I've been really looking forward to because we're talking about something that sits right at the intersection of student well-being and the tools schools use to support it. I'm joined by my two friends from August Schools, and August Schools is a leading software platform for student support, health, and well-being in schools. Pete Russell is a co-founder of August, and after more than a decade in strategy and product development at top software and financial services firms, including Cedar and Bridgewater Associates. He holds an MBA from Yale and a BA from the University of Chicago. Victoria Bush is a product manager at August, where she partners with schools to build tools that help them better support their students. She previously worked in product marketing and health tech and also holds an MBA from Yale School of Management. And Victoria and I have been working very closely together on this product, and so I'm excited to have them both here today to talk about moving beyond spreadsheets and disconnected systems towards something that actually reflects the complexity of student life. Welcome to the table, my friends. How are you?
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
My mom after that intro.
Well, we do what we can around here at the table. It's so great to have you guys here. Like I said, I'm super excited about having this conversation because we've been talking for a while, and now to see the product come to fruition is pretty exciting. So we're going to jump right in. Pete, you spent over a decade in software and financial services before co-founding August. What was the moment you looked at how independent schools were managing student support and thought there has to be a better way?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2021. So I don't give us a ton of credit for identifying the fact that in the height of the pandemic, that the systems supporting health and well-being in schools were failing. That was the pressure test.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks who hadn't thought that much about health and well-being, who were maybe thinking, geez, mental health is becoming an issue for us, but we can wait another year. All of a sudden, all of these systems were getting really, really pushed to their limits. We're seeing counselors, leave independent schools for private practice. It was such a dynamic environment in that moment. So I do joke a little bit in that like the problem was pretty glaring and obvious at that time. And rewinding back, we knew we wanted to do an EHR. We knew that we wanted to do a health record system. Because we knew the competition was a little bit soft there.
Okay.
But Insight really kind of got us excited and enthusiastic when we started talking to counselors. Counselors were really kind of fighting a really big battle without much armament. One early conversation always comes to mind when I think about like the very, very beginning, like first 5 conversations I'd had with independent school leaders. I'm talking to a dean of counseling at a really great independent school in California. And she's talking about what she does in June. So next month, before this product existed, before we got started, she had her notebook where she took notes on every interaction she had with students over the course.
I think I know where this is going.
100 pages in a spiral-bound notebook, chronological, right? One meeting after another. We know how it goes. And what she would do at the end of the year is rip out all the pages and organize them by students, so she could say, "Okay, this is what I did for this," and like we laugh. Meanwhile, laughing with you, student life professionals, because we know that this kind of thing happens in a lot of different use cases. So that was a moment where I was like, software could be helpful.
Might be helpful here. Might be helpful.
And in the broader pandemic context, that's how we got started.
Gotcha. So for listeners who aren't familiar with August Schools, can you describe the platform, either one of you, Victoria or Pete, and what it actually does and who uses it day to day right now?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a full system for student support for health, well-being, and additional supports like learning support. So we started with school counselors. We expanded into physical health use cases, so including school nurses, athletic staff, and that first kind of bigger thing was wellness, right? So we were the only platform for a while that was serving the wellness directors who are managing both physical and mental health teams.
Okay.
Giving them one place to have nurses and counselors documenting in a way that didn't fully share all the information, but let folks share the information they wanted to share. This kind of early concept of secure transparency, how to have folks who work with highly sensitive matters documenting in a single platform, and coordinating without betraying student trust and privacy. So that was the wellness piece. Then we added on support, talking to a lot of learning specialists who just don't have a product to keep track of building plans, keep track of student interventions. So that's where we started talking about a bigger student support umbrella and really talk to student support directors about, whoa, you're managing counselors and nurses, these radically different systems, but they have these very, very important interconnections. A student who's showing up to the nurse's office with the stomach ache that seems to only exist during a class where they feel challenged.
Right.
So you wouldn't expect learning support in the nurse's office to have meaningful insight to share.
No, absolutely.
So that's kind of the stuff that we kept peeling back the onion. And it's been such a pleasure working with you, Bridget, to expand our aperture even further to student life professionals, deans, assistant principals, and division heads as they think trying to bring behavior, attendance into this broader well-being and support picture.
Wonderful. And so you talked a little bit about kind of in the early days and what you were experiencing when in June with the teacher or the counselor or nurse said that they did with all of their pieces of paper. But outside of that, what does the student support infrastructure typically look like that you guys see? Is it paper? Is it something else? Like, what are you walking into generally when you are first start working with a school?
Yeah, I'll take first pass, and then I think Victoria's going to have a rich answer for this one too. We see a little bit of everything. There's a little bit of paper. Often it's a kind of epistemological thing. It's like the notebook exists or doesn't exist depending on who's asking.
That's hard.
And folks think that this information is from subpoenas if you pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
So there's some of that. There's a lot of Google Drive. There's a lot of informal processes happening in email. And I think one of the cool parts of when we first start working with schools is kind of discovering and unpacking the mess. Is our system can help you start structuring and formalizing this stuff. And the first thing is like, where is this stuff? Where should it be? And it just invites these really conversations that are less about tech and more about policy and process.
Got you. Victoria, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest thing I thought of when I heard your question is often when we talk to these schools, they already have this amazing, very thought out, incredible process that they've all come together, brainstormed, and solidified. And yet they don't have the tools to actually put that into practice consistently. So well, the crazy part is like, that's the hard part. The hardest part is like
It's
brainstorming.
getting everyone on the same page.
So schools have already done the really hard part, and we're here to just help with the, putting it into practice bit. And so I think a lot of schools have done the thinking. They just they don't have the tools to actually be able to put that into practice. They're limited by Google Forms that are not secure, or by, some people are in paper notebooks, other people are in Google Docs. And so I think that's the biggest place where I love to just hear what people's process is, and then how we can sort of slot that into the platform, because, we're here to support the process that these schools want to execute. And so Yeah, that's sort of the fun part, is like, how do we make it happen?
Yeah, like I think
Make it happen.
there's a lot of policy and process and theory. And getting there is hard work, getting alignment in theory, but then all of a sudden putting it into practice
Putting into practice.
exactly. And how does the reality inform the process? That's where things get really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why I was so excited when I first had the conversation with you guys about introducing something for student life professionals, because there's a lot of information that can come through that office, and it's not necessarily connected. It's a lot of silos that are happening. And so for you to have a product that could pull these pieces in a way that's helpful to see the full picture of the student, is amazing, and will be so helpful for everyone in the life of the school, not just the student life professionals so they can do their job better, but everyone in the life of the school who has access to it. But my question for you, though, because we talk about this information and not having it being fragmented, and that fragmenting can actually cost schools a lot of money in terms of the care of that the students receive, if they don't put something in the place that has everyone on the same page. Can you talk a little bit about that cost, and what you're seeing with schools when you are looking at your system, or looking at what you're trying to help schools do?
Yeah, I think we think about continuity of care across two axes. Like there's longitudinal care, and we see that disrupted a lot as folks move through a natural transition from a lower school to middle school to upper school. Counselor handoffs, expensive, messy, often don't happen. A student who just made themselves vulnerable and shared their life story with a middle school counselor. Of course, an upper school counselor is going to need to rebuild that trust. Right. But unfortunate that sometimes happens from square zero, just because systems don't have that kind of continuity longitudinally in place. And then across teams, again and again, is kind of going back to that nurse example, right? So, classically, the school nurse's office is a place where class avoidance kind of manifests. Like it's a place for students to go when they have a physical health problem, when they have a mental health problem, when they just don't feel like they belong in a given instruction environment. It's a safe place to go. That information goes and gets lost there when it have a data dark. Meanwhile, the school nurse, highly credentialed folks who they are trained, they're often coming from the hospital environment about keeping notes and documentation secure and safe. So, okay, geez, how do we break this paradigm of everyone's doing the right thing and keeping sensitive information to themselves, but the student is going from learning support to counseling support and nurse support, and the village just isn't informed in a way that can give kind of holistic support to that student. The cost is churn. The cost is kids not feeling heard. The cost is kids slowly disenrolling. We've done some early analysis based on some of our new AI products with production data that shows students who leave school early, whatever the reason is, when students leave early a lot, they are often the ones who churn. It's one of the highest predictors.
Interesting.
It's not necessarily full day absences. A lot of reasons for that. But a student who's finding a reason to just flee the campus. So much signal in there, revenue costing signal for school leaders.
Interesting. And so those are the kind of kids that can definitely slip through the cracks, right? Because they were at school, right? And so the initial attendance is taken and everything seems to be okay. And so if you're not tracking that on a regular basis, where does this show up, right? Who's monitoring this? How are we kind of tackling this issue? Unless perhaps and we'll talk about attendance in a few minutes, if you're tracking attendance per class, and so you see that this student's always missing, sixth period or whatever. But outside of that, you might not know. And so having something like this where you can see an aggregate of information for a student, the life of the school, not just in a particular year, is certainly really helpful.
Yeah.
You talk. Oh,
Just
go ahead.
for a second, is like,
Yeah.
I think some folks listening might be like, oh, cool. Like, great. There's a system where everything's exposed. That's scary for me consuming that information. How am I going to get buy-in for people to share this information?
Right.
And the answer is, I think, a really a role-based system that is very, very intentional about which information is private and lets folks take proactive actions to say, I'm not going to give you the full treatment note I conducted in the clinic, but you as school leader deserve to know the metadata about which kids are showing up at what times for a big picture reason, right?
Absolutely.
This is the comfort. It makes a school feel good. Only the right information is getting shared. This is free for all that betrays student privacy.
Right. Absolutely.
And the other thing, just going back to the costs, just talking to a divisional head out in California, she was saying, before August, if something happened and a kid, came to her for some reason, she would then have to spend a lot of time going to the counselor, going to the learning specialist, going to the nurse, going to the teachers, all trying to track down what's going on with the student. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of meetings. And so being able to just have that high level data on this kid has met with the learning specialist, 5 times this month. I'm not seeing those confidential notes, but I can see that this kid is, engaging with our learning support team. That just helps add that context, understand sort of like that full picture without having to go chase down a bunch of people at school.
Yeah, it's really about getting the right information to the right people, right? And so it's not open for everyone. Everyone can't see all the things. But as also, you want to look at this as, adults play several different roles in a school community, right? And one of those could be advisor. And so as an advisor, having some additional information about a student really helps when you're talking to the parent, can really help you follow up with a student also. And so you want to make sure that we are opening up those silos a little bit so that with the idea that we want to better support the student. But in addition, also for the Student Life Office to be able to see trends. And so if you can look at data in aggregate, you can see, early April is when we had a lot of discipline issues, or, the second week in May, there's a lot of absenteeism, those sorts of things you can start looking at and slice and dice even by demographic, what's going on with 10th grade boys in March, or what's going on with 11th grade girls in November. Being able to have that information and be able to act on that in a way that can help your school community be a little bit healthier, I think is also exciting and something that I think this product would be able to do for schools as well.
Kids miss... we're preaching to the choir, I think, with this crowd.
Fair enough. Right.
Sometimes kids misbehave for a reason, right? I think that's kind of just like the big thing behind our entry into behavior management. It's not kids acting out in a vacuum, right?
Right.
There's
it's all connected.
Someone in the village is gonna not be surprised, right?
Yep.
We're trying to just limit the surprise.
Exactly.
Proactive interventions.
Absolutely. We definitely want to be proactive as much as we can be. So, Victoria, your role is to partner with schools to build the right tools. And so what does that process actually look like? And how do you figure out what a school needs versus what they think they need?
Yeah, no, I always say I have the best job ever. I just get to talk to all these people all day. But I'll say that it's a lot of just connecting with people and listening to what they're trying to accomplish. I think often people think, oh, I know what I need. It's this feature that would be helpful to me. But it's sort of getting to the root of why do you want that feature? Like, what are you trying to do here? Like, what's your goal? Is it, I want more visibility, or I'm trying to do this thing a little quicker, or get to another place a little faster. And so, I feel so lucky to have so many people within our August Schools community who are really thoughtful about this work, who think about this. They do the most selfless work. They're supporting these students every single day. And so they have such good insight into what would be helpful. And so I get to then sort of translate that into a product and tools and, what would be helpful. And I love that it's sort of this very like feedback, connected process where, I can talk to a bunch of nurses and say, what about, last year's enrollment process could be better. And then, think through what we can make, and then have that be sort of iterative and take it back and say, okay, how does this look? What do you think? Is this accomplishing? And, what you had in mind. And that's what I love about our work too, is that, you have this incredible on the ground experience of working with schools, being a dean yourself, and, experiencing that sort of day-to-day flow. And so just having that back and forth, talking through these problems and, okay, what's the goal? What are we trying to do here? And then sort of translating that into a tool has just been super fun. So I loved getting to work with you on this. And
me too. It's been a blast.
From schools already of just, we already have a couple schools, using the new dean role and the new restorative behavior content. And so it's just so rewarding to like see that all come to fruition and people just be really excited about, something that they didn't have before that's going to make their life easier.
Exactly. And I can't believe, like, I feel like it was just yesterday we were talking about like us building this thing, like I built it, but it's here, it's working. It's very exciting. It's very exciting. So for the skeptics out there who are like, there's a tension between efficiency and humanity, right? Schools want streamlined systems for sure. They want to be able to kind of check the box and move on. But, student support is really relational work, right? And so how do you build technology that serves the relationship rather than replacing it?
Yeah, to start on this one, like, we started this company in 2021 when the trend in ed tech was just like, how can we telehealth our way into solutions? We're districts with different kinds of staffing needs. That makes a lot of sense. But a lot of ed tech was focused on how do we solve this problem outside of the school? How do we pull in a professional using a technology? How do we try to recreate a technology with some bot type thing? How do we have students directly access certain intervention experiences that are non-relational? There's just never been what we think kids need. Just kind of starting with just base intuition, just like, no. We create tools for providers and folks in schools to be able to get rid of the administrative work, clear out the chasing information down, all of this, the kind of grunt, tedious work, so you have more energy to just be present with students. Like, that's the goal. It's to unlock these opportunities for high quality person-to-person intervention. So like, okay, how can we not create another dashboard for the sake of creating a dashboard?
Right.
We basically say, hey, these 10 students, go talk to them, and you don't need to do all of this work to kind of find the path to connection. Like, that's the thing we're trying to enable, not avoid or make redundant. So I don't know, we're like it's a software as a service company, and like, we're big on the service part, we're big on the people part, and like, when we spend time in schools, it's like, it's a physical game. It is like, you cannot abstract away from a child with needs who is in front of you.
Absolutely not.
There's not a tech for that.
Nope. There's no app for that. Absolutely not. I love that. And I also feel like with this product, in terms of the relational piece, having more information could perhaps help you be more relational. And so I just want to highlight that a little bit because oftentimes, kids walk around and they're carrying things and they are experiencing things and things are happening that we don't know about. And so then when something happens on the other end, like you said, it's all connected, whether it's discipline, they're not showing up to school or um, other things are happening, we don't connect those dots. And I feel like this product will allow you to connect those dots so that you are connecting before correction. So I say connection before correction all the time. And so if you can really connect with a student by knowing what's happening in their lives, having a full picture of what's happening with them, then you can correct them in a way that feels appropriate and not too heavy handed or not heavy handed enough. It can go both ways. And so I think, this product can really bridge that gap and help with that.
It's funny. And just to say, like, schools have, I think, unique positions on some of this stuff. Like, so there's a lot of skepticism in school counseling circles about using an electronic health record system. Like,
sure, yeah,
like a lot of nervousness about privacy, and I don't know. I have trouble kind of reconciling it with my own. Like, my therapist uses Simple Practice. I don't find that odd. I don't find that to be technology getting in the way of our. I never see that product.
Right.
It's an important documentation service. It's a best practice. So I just wonder how much of this stuff is just norms masquerading as tech aversion.
It's tradition, right? And so we've done things for so long. Schools are like Titanic, right? Like they move very slowly. And so, I get it. I worked in a school where I oversaw the health center and, the skepticism behind moving towards electronic medical records was high because that's not something that they did, is not something they didn't trust it, and all those sorts of things. But we do now know, fast forward 20 years. I mean, it's crazy to say that, I was kind of in that seat 20 years ago. Now I'm dating myself, but that's another podcast for another time. That, the dean knows one thing, the advisor knows one thing, the counselor and the health center knows another thing. We have to connect those dots. And we have tools to be able to do this in this day and age that doesn't compromise boundaries, that doesn't, that's safe to use in terms of kind of the legality and what you'd be subpoenaed for, because that's the other thing, people, what's discoverable? Well, if I don't tell you, then you can't discover it, right? Well, it's a little bit trickier than that. And so I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about that piece, because I do think that that's where some people kind of get hung up, especially the folks outside of who aren't health professionals, who aren't kind of in that realm and don't quite know how this tool will work for them on the student life side when they haven't seen anything like this. Because as far as I know, there's no other product out there like this. So let's go back to that. I just want to talk a little bit more about that, because I do think it's super important to talk about kind of the legality piece that people are concerned about and, worried about, like, who has access to the information. How do you ensure that the right people have the right access and that the appropriate things are being put into the system as best as you can as a provider?
Yeah, I can start on this one. So maybe we start with counseling, because I think it's kind of the area where there's the most confusion, and it's the area where I just see the biggest diff between practice in any other context versus practice in schools. Like, everyone uses electronic health records outside of schools. Everyone in schools is a little bit weird about it. And the fact of the matter, and meanwhile, like, does your school take any money that makes it FERPA regulated? Most independent schools aren't actually FERPA regulated. They're not HIPAA regulated providers if they're not billing insurance. We have a white paper that unpacks kind of like the true legal burdens based on different scenarios. The short answer is, for most independent schools, the actual regulatory pieces of privacy are actually, it's mostly your school's kind of policy. In terms of note discoverability, the burden to keep a given piece of documentation undiscoverable or unsubpoenaable is exceedingly high. You need to prove that a piece of documentation is only used for your personal memory jogging. Any piece of information on that record that is not solely for you to remind yourself of something injects it into the formal student record, an educational record rather, that can be discoverable. So what happens with the notebook that might or might not exist is, in a discovery process, if you don't have a formal EHR, you don't have a shield that's giving the data you actually do need to give in this kind of case, who did you meet with, at what time, about what, how many times?
Right.
If you can't provide that and you're digging into your Post-it notes, it's all getting discovered. And that's when the details of the messy divorce end up getting discovered. So, we pretty early on got great advice from someone who's like, I tell my team when you're documenting, you think of a parent looking over your left shoulder and a lawyer looking over your right shoulder. That should be the attitude you bring to your notes. If you want to write something down on a notebook to the side that literally is just for you, just a memory jogger that won't be subpoenaed, your chances of defending that while you have that formal record are significantly higher. The folks who get subpoenaed end up documenting after. That is a conversation I've had innumerable times. Looking at it from a student life professional's lens, this is where the legality really ends up being about consistency of process, right?
Yes.
So there, it's not about HIPAA, not about FERPA. It's this kid got expelled, this kid got disciplined, this thing happened, and the parents are coming and saying, the institution did something wrong here. They didn't follow their own stated policy and process.
Yep.
And how a lot of these shops run. It's a very human, natural thing. Hey, there are a lot of exceptions. Each case is a snowflake. Each one is complex. But if you're not documenting, this is our 10-step process. This is what we do every single time, and we write it down, and we can point at the record for every serious discipline case we've ever had. That's how you prevent your institution from getting dragged into a minimum.
Absolutely.
So,
Process and consistency.
It's a topic of passion.
Yeah, same. I talk about it all the time. So I'm with you right there for sure. You guys work across a range of school environments. And so what are the differences you see in how schools approach student support depending on their context? And how can the platform flex to meet the schools where they are?
Well, I'll say we see a huge range of different types of schools, and one of the biggest ways you see it, sort of the spectrum. You have some schools who are sort of in this like full transparency. We want everyone in the school to know everything about a student. Our platform can serve you. We
got you.
And then you have schools on the other end of the spectrum who are like, we want everything as locked down as possible. It's sort of this, you're trading off, being hyper collaborative, let's like hyper transparent. And so and I think most schools are somewhere in the middle, but I think so helpful about having these really granular like visibility and permissions controls is that as a school, you decide what is our culture, and then we can make that visibility match your values and your culture. And so, each school is unique. You know that better than anybody.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It's really about having that flexibility to make it so that it matches what the school is looking for. And especially, with the work we did in the behavior space and, restorative approaches, having it be flexible enough that, our conduct process checklist, it's not going to look the same for every school, but that you can customize that, really make it your own. And like I was saying before, sort of like reflect your existing systems and practices in a way that, we just help you act on it. So I think that's something that's really special about August, is just how customizable it is.
That's awesome. And so, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, just one kind of clicking back and answering the question, kind of comparing independent schools to public school districts as an example. Answer with even a broader aperture. It's been really, really interesting to see certain constructs that I had only seen in the public school domain filter into private schools. I would have thought the innovation would primarily flow the other way. I see it flowing both ways.
Okay.
And it's these districts operating at scale that forces them into having kind of
some real systems,
data-driven, because at a highly resourced independent school, hey, maybe through heroics, everyone can make sure no one falls through the cracks.
Right.
Multi-tier systems of support, these kind of more mature kind of frameworks and data systems that are popular in public school districts. We're starting to see more of that chatter in independent schools, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So where do you guys see schools getting the most immediate value from August? And then talk about kind of the longer term impact.
Well, one thing that sort of comes to mind in terms of immediate impact, and I think, you see these just like IT directors or directors of student support who really see sort of adopting August as this opportunity to get everyone on the same page. So it's almost like this forcing function where we're like, okay, we have this new platform that serves learning specialists, counselors, nurses, athletic trainers, deans, divisional heads. And all of a sudden now we can get everybody aligned on the process. And so I think that I love seeing schools who will meet with us and sort of collaborate with us and say like, okay, this is our goal. We're trying to get everyone into the same process. Like August is our opportunity to make that happen. We no longer have people using Google Docs and then other people using paper notebooks. And so I think that's one of the sort of the most immediate like impacts that the platform has. But then as I always say, it sort of takes a year to get sort of up and running and get to that point where you're starting to reevaluate your systems and say, and I always think of it as like you sort of want to think towards the end to get to the beginning and say, what is the data that we want to be able to see about our students? And then we can sort of back into what our documentation and what all that looks like to make sure that we get that. So let's like one of the things you mentioned about the incident report is that, for example, students getting into a car accident in the parking lot. Like, let's say that we want to know at the end of the year, how many times.
How many of those did we have that? Yeah.
So now we have this structured data to be able to document that. And then at the end of the year, we can say, we had a lot of car accidents. Maybe we need to think about our parking lot a little more. So things like that, I think that's sort of the benefit you get a year down the road is being able to start to see the data come in. And it's sort of this magical moment when people start to see the data and they're like, whoa, like, I think of this one director of counseling who, before August, they sort of knew that more girls came to the counseling office than boys. But all of a sudden they had this pie chart on their analytics
real
board
data
that was an 80-20 split of girls and boys. And it was like, when you see that, you're like, oh my goodness, like that's, it's not
crazy.
40, that's a lot. And so
boys a lot less likely to come into the counseling office.
Yeah.
And it was this really cool moment that sort of prompted them to start a new initiative where
think about programming, right?
The
targeted programming,
going to the sports practices and talking about resilience in sports, and they were able to like improve that ratio, and it's just like that's the sort of cool stuff that you can start to see after,
That is very cool. I love that. So what's on deck for August? What's kind of new and exciting? What's happening now that this new program's already rolled out? I feel like now I'm a little bit old news here. So what's new?
You know how NACE is going to be digesting the restorative practices and behavior product. We're going to be putting out a lot over the summer we did a lot of research to understand restorative practices, how we got here from zero tolerance policies, what's that history, what does it mean, and just bringing behavior into that overall well-being picture, and really trying to pair proactive supports with students who are having behavior problems. That's going to be a big theme, and there's very much not old news.
Fair enough.
As we think about dean and student life professionals workflows, one thing that's been coming up a lot since the COVID kind of beginnings of the company is attendance wasn't an issue before.
I know, yeah.
And it's a thing now. So we've put together a really interesting workflow product that at the end of the day, the result and outcome is very simple. It's notifications and nudges, especially if they're framed as being supportive, bring students into seats. And just very simply, if a student has missed 5 algebra classes, if you email the parent and let them know that, it is unlikely they're going to miss that 6th and 7th algebra class.
Yep.
So we've put together a highly configurable system is someone missing one single, have they broken a policy on how many days they've missed, things like that, just to take it out, just fully automate it.
Yeah.
And then it takes the dean out of being bad cop on these things. It's proactive. It's really, really, it's about letting families know, hey, worse, if the family doesn't know the kid's isn't there, let them know.
Yeah, gives them a heads up.
It's a challenge. If there's school avoidance, if there's anxiety, we have a counselor that they can meet with, proactively offer supports. That's the thing. It's not just you missed and you get a smack. It's
right.
It's you missed, and here are all the different ways we're here to pull you back into our community and make sure you know you belong.
That's awesome. So the folks who are hearing about you guys for the first time, Dean of Students or head of school who's curious about August, what's the best first step and how can people connect with you guys?
So many ways. hello@augustschools.com. You can just say, they send us an email. I'm Pete at augustschools.com. I'm the CEO. You can email me. This is Victoria at August Schools. Our website, augustschools.com, has a ton of different case studies, and all sorts of different kind of resources about the product. But a lot of this new stuff for student life professionals, frankly, the website is where the product is. So come talk to us if you're at all interested. Bargains galore as we just try to get
Bargains galore.
Yeah, we're trying to just get this in people's hands and get feedback. So we're really early on this product, and we love to find partners who are really thoughtful about this stuff. Like we know you are, Bridget, and I'm sure your audience is as well.
Absolutely. And for someone who's had the opportunity to see this product and to work with it, I do think it's super beneficial for schools in all the ways that we discussed here, but also some of the intangibles and thinking about relationship building and connection and having that information is invaluable. So I can't recommend this product enough. It can certainly be a game changer on your campus for sure.
Thanks for saying that.
Absolutely. So, because it's the truth. So, with that said, let's wrap up here with my final question for you. Let's fast forward 5 years, and August is doing exactly what you hope it will. What does student-supported independent schools look like that it doesn't look like today?
I not to the answer to everything's AI right now. I just especially in schools. I was just at the Technology and Leadership in Independent Schools conference talking with a lot of the cutting edge thinkers in the technology side of independent schools. And I was having the same conversation again and again where they're like, I don't think our leadership knows how much work's about to change. I think folks are starting to understand education is changing.
Right.
It's changing. This isn't just the kids are cheating on their essays anymore. This is
it's further deeper than that.
Curriculum for a changing knowledge workforce, but the workflows themselves. since December, my personal, how I conduct my day-to-day work and my knowledge work, I have a highly relational job with a lot of knowledge work, like many school leaders. I now use Claude as my primary interface for doing most work. 5 months ago, it was completely different. The change in workflows will be fundamental. In the next 5 years, I think the way we interrelate with technology tools will be very different. And I predict that there will be much less feeling of interacting with technology, much more technology vendors promising and doing pricing based on outcomes, and for services and technology to be paired together in ways that I just think we're going to feel a lot less like we interact with a computer and then interact with a person, and more that we're going to kind of have tools that are that almost feel like you're working with a person. Hey, I just got out of a meeting with this student, et cetera, et cetera. You kind of take your voice note as if you're talking to someone. That's all filed appropriately. Oh, Peter, have you thought of maybe a next step being to blah, blah, blah? Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's set up a follow-up meeting. Whoa. Conversational, working with softwares and technology in a more conversational way, and technology being much more oriented around your outcomes versus like, here's a product, have fun using it.
Good luck with it. Yeah. Very cool.
We'll see.
Yeah, well, it's happening, right? It's coming down the pike. I think that the lines are starting to blur a little bit even now as we speak. And so I've witnessed things. I'm like, whoa, that's not a real person? Yikes. Right? So very interesting. And I could talk about this stuff all day. I think it's super interesting, but we should probably close. So thank you so much, both of you, Pete and Victoria, for being here today. You know, this conversation about what it actually takes to support students well, the systems, the data, the relationships, and the technology that holds it all together is one that every student life professional needs to be having. But on all school campuses, not just the student life professionals, everyone needs to be talking about this. And so grateful for the work that you're doing and for the thoughtfulness you brought to this conversation and the product that you've produced. And so if you do want to learn more about August Schools, we'll put that in the show notes. August Schools is the website, but we will have all that information for you. And if you're not already doing so, please follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Search for Dean's Roundtable on both platforms. We'd love to see you there. If you're enjoying the table, please subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave us a review. It really helps people find us. And as always, thanks for pulling up a chair at the table today. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, or maybe something even to try in your own community. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time at the table.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table Podcast Series. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We're seeking founding partner schools to be the first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Victoria Bush and Pete Russell, produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund, and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.